the chat where you're calling in from. Um, feel free. I'm dialing in from Cambridge, Massachusetts on this gray winter afternoon. Let's see, Boulder, Jacksonville, nice. Oh, fellow Mass, nice, Laura. Awesome. Got a cool like international contingent with the UK and Canada as well. Nice. All right, excellent. Well, now that it's been about a minute, I think we can get started. Anyone else can just hop in as we go. So hi, everyone. It's great to have you here for our session today called How SiriusXM Uses UX Research to Drive Product Innovation. I just wanted to kick it off with a couple of housekeeping rules and notes. We will be recording the session. You may have heard that little Zoom voiceover at the beginning, and sharing it out afterwards. And we will also have plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So, please post any questions you have for Laura in that Q&A box along the bottom bar of your Zoom. And I will unmute the folks who have left in some questions so you can ask directly just to, get this a little more interactive and collaborative than me just reading your questions. But with that, I think we can dive in. To introduce myself first before I hand it over to Laura, my name is Colleen Pate. I'm the Customer and Community Manager here at DScout. My pronouns are she, her. And here at DScout, we like to do a quick visual description as well, for folks who may have any visual impairments, or if they're just listening in without visuals, to give them a picture of who's talking. I am dialing in, as I mentioned, from Cambridge. I'm wearing a beige striped sweater, as it's been pretty chilly here recently, and I have long reddish hair and I'm wearing glasses today. So now I'll hand it over to you, Laura, just to introduce yourself, name, title, pronouns, and that quick description.
Hi, everyone. Super stoked to be here today. My name is Laura Oxenfeld. I'm also right near where Colleen is. I'm in Boston, just on the other side of the water of Cambridge. And I am calling in today in a very cozy, wintry vibe. So I have a white sweater on with like bright color kind of patterns, 1970s vintage vibe. And then also my background is a photograph I took in Vermont at a ski trip this past weekend. And then also I'm, mid to late 30s, white female, long, straight, blonde hair, no makeup. It's Zoom, no need for makeup.
Definitely agree. Excellent. Well, thanks again for everyone for joining. We have a really fantastic session planned with Laura, who will be, sharing her insights as a research leader who has made a significant impact at SiriusXM in really not that much time. As you'll hear, she only joined in August of last year. A huge part of what we're going to talk about today is how she's really leading the innovation charge at SiriusXM as a company undergoing, a lot of change and growth at the moment, and looking to recent past research to help inform where the company can go to continue innovating and delivering new features that users and listeners will love to continue to drive the business forward. So, a key phrase that you're going to hear from us today will be concept ideation. So I do want to level set a little bit with a quick poll to kick things off of, has anyone here translated concepts from workshop all the way into an actual shipped product? So we'll get that poll launched. If you want to drop your answers in, be curious to hear, maybe in the Q&A time at the end, why yes, and then, why no for folks. Cool. Let's see. We're at about 60% of participation. If we want to share the poll, 61% of you said yes. You have taken that from workshop to full shipped product, which is amazing. Nice 60-40 breakdown. Excellent. And so to dive in, To dive in, SiriusXM is a name that's, been around for a while, but I know is, undergoing a lot of really exciting growth right now. Laura, do you want to share some context for the audience, if they don't know what Sirius is, and how it has really kind of been in this transformative place since you joined in August?
Yeah, so SiriusXM is a satellite radio company. It was originally two companies in the early 2000s. They launched satellites into space, and it was a completely new technology for you to get radio from satellite. So same programming anywhere you were in the United States. And they did launch an app in the late 2000s, however, and it's been, updated over time, but satellite radio has really been the primary focus for so long. But as the market has shifted and the competition's not AM, FM radio, it's not CDs or the music on your iPod. Our competition are digital streaming apps. So think Spotify, iHeartMedia, Apple Music. So there's all these streaming apps that are there when you're in CarPlay or Android Auto. So as that shift has happened in the market, SiriusXM, satellite radio is always going to be the primary line of business, but they're reinvesting in the digital portion of their products and their team. And so if you are a customer or you heard in the news, we launched a brand new app December 14th. And so that's part of this digital transformation, but they're also growing the team. And that's one of the reasons I'm there. So they're really, building out a modern technology organization.
Nice. It's so exciting. I feel like to join an org that's like on the cusp of releasing something new and really being part of that. So, as you can see here, I think a lot of the work that we'll be talking about, started when you joined Sirius, also with, the app launch being set this time last year for December 2023. Can you kind of talk through this as an overall timeline before we, dive into like the step-by-step of what it's like to prep and execute the concept ideation vision workshops you did, as well as like the analysis, share out, and the whole life cycle?
Yeah, definitely. I'd love to share kind of the zoomed out view so folks have context as we double click on the details. And just to let listeners know, it might take me like 10-ish minutes to give this walkthrough. So just lean back and listen, and then Colleen, we can hop back into our conversation. So this all started in January before I was there. That's when the business said, we're going to make a new app. So it's not a redesign of the app that was already there. It's a completely new tech stack, new design, new functionality. It's entirely new. And so I started in August, and just like a moment of personal vulnerability, I'm one of the many, many people that got laid off. The tech market is what it is right now. And I'm sure there are plenty of people on this call that have gone through that, are going through that, or they know someone. So if any of you are going through that, I see you. It's hard, and just keep your chin up. It's tough out there. Okay, so I started in August 21st, so the end of August. And, I was doing my meet and greets and looking around, but I started to sense a gap. And that gap I sensed was because of the experience I brought to the table. So two things. Thing one is the last two jobs I was in were at like mid-stage startups where innovation is the name of the game. You have to be constantly ideating, what's the next big play? Let's throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks. So I've really been working in that, like what's next year going to look like. I've been working in that space. The other thing I brought to the table here is way before COVID, I actually got trained and certified in running human-centered design workshops remotely. So I've been running workshops remotely for a very long time. I got trained through Luma Institute, if anyone's interested. But anyway, so I started at SiriusXM, I'm meeting the team, learning what they're working on, and I realized like everyone is super heads down executing to hit this launch deadline by the end of the year, which is very important. But also I was wondering what's next after you launch and do all the fast follows and fixes. And my boss, Duani, who I'll probably mention 100 times today, she agreed. And she also comes from an innovative UX research role. She was at Moonshot Labs for a long time. So she's also used to research, not just making sure the interface is good, but also helping, think of product strategy, business strategy as well. So she said, put a proposal together. We'll share it out with, leadership, and we'll go from there. So that's where I thought through what should this workshop look like, and Colleen will get into the details later. But I chose the method called Creative Matrix, and in that I used existing user research, not research I did, but what I walked into. I used that as well as business goals and product strategy as the boundaries of the exercise. And then I shared that with design and research leadership, got the thumbs up. And this is where we made a conscious decision that did impact, there were consequences later. It was a conscious decision that maybe reduced the amount of traction that we feel with the concepts. And that was, we decided to have this workshop be just design and research for two reasons. One reason is the most important thing was not distracting people that were heads down marching towards this launch date. And then the other reason to have it just design and research was this is the first time we had ever done anything like this. So we wanted it to be an internal pilot. So we moved forward with that decision. And, it had been a few months since I ran a workshop, and I always forget every time how much work goes into the prep. And it was great that I was new, and so I had plenty of time. At SiriusXM, there's a design ops function, which I've never worked with before. And it was so great to partner, his name was Paul, to partner with Paul on like preparing and thinking through timing and breaks and moderation. And what if people are multitasking? So we prepped together, and then I ran the workshop. And then the other part that always takes longer than what I remember is crunching the data after. So folks cranked out a bunch of ideas, but you have to make sense of it before you can share it out in a meaningful way. So I spent maybe a week or two partnering with Kelsey, who's another researcher at SiriusXM, on affinity mapping the themes. And as soon as I had something that was clean and digestible enough in FigJam, that's when I shared it with design and research leadership. And we went back a few times to iterate, like, out of this huge mess of concepts, like what actually matters most to the business right now versus what's a little too far out to concern ourselves with. And then that's when I transitioned into a lot of collaboration with Dewani, my boss, on what to present and how to present to the VPs of product. And they were aware of this process the whole time. So they were informed, but not participating. So they knew this was going on. And, we had to make sure that the storytelling was on point. The evidence behind these concepts was on point. Otherwise, you're just sharing ideas and there's no like context about why they're important. So I did that share out the week before this launch, and everyone knew this was going to happen. But launch happened, and then everyone's focus has been pretty swallowed up on what are the bugs we need to fix right now? What are modifications we need to make after the Christmas and New Year's holidays? So from top down, during the concept share out, there was different levels of connection and interest, but then launch happened and everyone's been pretty, not distracted, but they're focused on what's most important, which is making sure our new product is like satisfying customers and that we're listening. So in January, I've had some regroup conversations with the VPs, but that conversation tends to gravitate more towards what's on their mind, what do they want the future to be, instead of going back to these previous concepts. And then I decided to pivot because I felt like that wasn't going anywhere. So I pivoted to the bottoms up approach, which has been successful, which is having one-on-ones with the individual contributor level product managers, the ones that write the requirements, know the nuance of the product, know the nuance of the roadmap. And that's where I've had success. For example, some of the PMs are like, oh my goodness, this one slice of a concept I'm already building right now. But now I can see how this experience can evolve. Or they're saying, oh, I actually was talking about this problem space the other day, but have no idea how we could even start to solve it. And so part of this is relationship building, maybe more than getting the actual concepts out there. So both the tops down and bottom up know that research can do more than just make sure the interface is usable. Here are the ways we can contribute to innovation, in addition to a couple of these items are definitely on the roadmap now, which is great. So that's the bird's eye view.
Amazing. Excellent. Thanks for walking through that whole thing. And then for us to, begin to I think dive in a little deeper. A lot of us, I think, have had the experience that of being at an org that's working full speed towards a huge launch, like you've just described. And kind of, despite that, you started looking ahead to like the what's next after the what's next, in terms of what could come after this huge launch. So like once you decided to enact this process, how and where did you actually decide to start? And kind of, what inputs were really framing the scope of what you were going to try to achieve?
Yeah, great question. So when I started, my team had put together kind of an onboarding package, and part of that was different existing research to use. And this is what was kind of like outdated, and it was done by a vendor and done for different parts of the organization that weren't the technology org. But in reading it, I felt that this was, it was segments. So market segments, jobs to be done, and value prop, and a study on like young zillennials, which are young millennials and old Gen Z. So I had these pieces of like foundational research that I didn't do, and thought, and actually started asking around, like, how aware are you of these segments of these jobs to be done? And I realized, because almost the whole team had been hired over the last year, people were not familiar with all these foundational older research products. So that was a mega input. So 50% of the workshop was actually, before the workshop, I went through these 4 different studies and I pulled out key slides. What are the most important things to know about the segments, the jobs to be done, the value proposition, and millennials? And so, yeah, 2 hours of this workshop was me doing a readout of someone else's research. But during that time, people had a scratch pad to write down product ideas as they came to mind. So that was a big input. And then the other input was the business goals and the product strategy. So I actually, in my onboarding package, there was a slide deck of what is the product strategy and vision. And I like cross compared the product strategy with what was in the version of the app that came out in December. And I crossed things out saying, okay, we think this and this are going to accomplish these parts of strategy. So I was left with a list of product strategy that had been untouched. And then I paired that also with, just listening in all hands meetings and other time, anytime I heard like an executive leader say something relevant, I heard the chief content officer, the chief branding officer say some really key things. So I put all that together as the other part of the boundaries. So the boundaries was the foundational user research, and then the other boundaries were the product vision and business goals.
Nice. And I know, we know now that you of course landed on a workshop, but what were there kind of other activities you maybe considered, or how did you know that a workshop would be hopefully the best way to get to where you needed to go?
Yes, so that's actually a great question too. So why creative matrix as a method? Actually, I don't have the book on my desk, but I still have my book from Luma Institute. And there's also the book, I think, Universal Methods of Design, which also has a lot of methods. But whenever I'm like, what method is needed, and it's not off the top of my head, I'll go through a couple of my books at home. And, there's different activities for, are you trying to ideate? Are you trying to discover? Are you trying to narrow down? So, we really needed to ideate, and creative matrix as a method, it has you crank out as many ideas as possible. And it's a lot of silent ideation, so that it's not, in a workshop, it can be, okay, that person's talking. Like, you need to have it some silent ideation, so everyone is putting as many ideas out there as possible.
So yeah, we've definitely all had that experience of like, you hear the first couple ideas, they're kind of loud, and you're like, oh, that sounds great. I don't really need to come up with what I was thinking doesn't make sense now. That's great to like leave time and space for that. And then like to actually zoom in more on, the workshop, creative matrix. How did you, kind of get ready and prepare to lead something like this? And was there anything that you had attendees prepare for ahead of actually joining?
Yeah, no prep for the participants, because that was another, consideration. We wanted this to be as little lift for the participants as possible because of, the launch being most important. I think what took the most time was going through these 4 different studies and narrowing down what's the most important thing? Because so that the second picture behind there is screenshots of some of the slides I went over. And I mean, to go over those key slides of 4 studies took 2 hours. So what I originally had would have taken all day. And it's so it was really yeah, a lot of the prep was just pulling out what are the most important things that relate to the product strategy we haven't addressed yet. And then the rest of the prep was more, since this wasn't my work, I had to practice my voiceover a couple times. If it was my own work, that would have taken less time. And then the picture in the front here is the creative matrix board, like a sliver of it. So I made each participant one of these boards as well as a scratch pad. So along the top, it had the human enablers, so segments and jobs to be done. And then those 4 gray boxes there were the product strategy business goal prompts. So it was, you know, making sure each participant had a board, was part of the setup, and then collaborating with Paul about timing, breaks. And then we talked a lot about like, what if we can tell someone's multitasking? How do we address that? And part of it is in the beginning, I said, you know, if you need to leave and come back, please just sit out and you know, turn off your Slack, put your phone on do not disturb. You're gonna have breaks throughout this to, you know, if you need to catch up on Slack.
I think that's a good rule to build in. Did you, as more of a side note, did you find that you felt that folks were like pretty engaged, pretty present when they were in there?
Yes, they were engaged, and it was good to have Paul as a co-facilitator, because when he noticed someone was not really like writing ideas down during the ideation portion, he would, you know, message them. And some people actually felt like, even though they've been here for 3 years, they're like, why would my ideas be any good? So it was great to have kind of that emotional partner in there, and he was kind of building people up and you know, and then had me say, you know, we're looking for no ideas are bad ideas. Like, we just want as many ideas as possible.
Absolutely. So then I think, you know, next, what it's time to talk about is, you know, how did you decide that you wanted to include these 7 folks who are designers and researchers, as well as, you know, what actually emerged?
Yeah, so the list, I really had nothing to do with the list personally. Oh, I just saw Susan Tomei drop a note. Yeah, sorry. Susan,
United
yeah,
on.
Susan and I, we did the Luma work together in Allstate, so those were the good days. But yeah, who was on the list? I had nothing to do with that because I was so new. I didn't even know who all the designers were. So I worked with Kelsey, the other researcher, and my boss, Dewani, like, who should this list be? And of course, the initial list they gave me was like 15 people. And for the exercises we were doing, you know, I was like, we need to limit this a little more. So it was just kind of a bit of a back and forth conversation with people who had the context of, you know, who are the people that like have shown in the past that they like just crank out good ideas anyway. But also we wanted someone from design systems, someone from research, someone from the app. So kind of like the different design discipline. Oh, and someone from content. So all the different design disciplines.
Yes. And then, you know, clearly you ended up with an enormous amount of concepts, 143.
Yes.
So, you know, after that step, the workshop's over, you're here with 143 concepts. How did you really approach like whittling that down into what you could actually, you know, have as like your short list, what you could actually put in front of leadership and partners across the business as like the outcomes and proposals for future work?
Yeah, so actually, if you can hop forward 1 slide to the screenshot of the FigJam. Yes. So this is what the analysis, the affinity mapping in FigJam ended up looking like. And this took 2 people at least a week, if not 2 weeks. So basically, each person had their FigJam board, and they had their little names on the tickets so we could see, you know, who wrote the ideas. And we copied all the ideas, all the sticky notes into a new workspace. So we maintained their original boards, made a new affinity mapping space, and then just started like, you know, affinity mapping, figuring out what the themes are. And then there's a couple of folks on this call that I've worked with before, and they know that my analysis style is extremely precise. I go down to the atomic level. I break it out into the absolute smallest pieces before you regroup it. And I do feel that's, I feel that that is a piece of critique that I have sometimes after workshops. I'll see like there's a bunch of great ideas, but then people don't give it the time to do as deep of analysis as they would on like a normal study. And then it just, you don't squeeze all the juice out of it. So we squeezed all the juice out of it. And then these color coding here is, so blue, green, and purple were the 3 highest level categories. And then each black item is like a subgroup, and then under each black item has the other items. And so I know it's zoomed out, but I try and make my my FigJam boards as digestible as possible. If you like, you know, if you're a stakeholder and you pop in, you can understand what the themes are. So this is what I brought to my first like review with design leadership, instead of wasting time and like putting it into a slide deck and seeing that, oh wait, half of these are actually not viable for the next 5 years, you know? So I brought this to get that gut check of here are the things that bubbled out, and based on, you know, what you all as senior leaders who have been here longer know about the business, what should we just cut entirely? So it was more of a conversation of things being too far out or cutting. And then also like, where have we actually already tried something in the past and then stalled or failed?
And so I think this kind of leads us to kind of like a little bit of a look back in terms of you're in a really interesting space of you're past a lot of this work, but you're also still in the middle of it as it hasn't fully wrapped up yet. So like looking back on, you know, what has worked well, as well as we'll obviously talk about what didn't work well. How do you think this went? You know, what worked well for you? What would you do again? And like notably, you know, we'll also talk about what you wouldn't do again.
Yeah, and I think before the learnings, just to back up a bit, because there was a lot of work between that FigJam board and then actually sharing with senior product leadership. So just to talk a little bit, you know, what that looked like. So I had, you know, 143 things. I kept getting rounds of feedback from the senior design and research leadership, which was helpful. But then I also started like I tagged each concept with which product manager, it's their area, and I would just Slack them, hey, are you working on something related to X, Y, and Z? Sometimes I hopped on calls with people, sometimes not, but because this was not like on the down low, but I was like, I don't know if I can share the concepts yet, or so I was just having conversations to ask people about what they're working on, and I started to track what are there already product briefs written on, what's already in the roadmap versus what's a net new idea. And so like when I was making the slides for the VP level product leadership, what it looked like was the storytelling of what research is important for them to understand so that the concepts have meaning. But then once we were looking at each concept, then I had little tags of, is this an existing work stream or is this a net new opportunity? And if there was already a product brief, then I would link the product brief. So I was showing breadcrumbs that like, we didn't just do this workshop and then here's ideas. I did the due diligence to figure out like what's already kind of in motion, or what's net new. Because that was one critique as well, as people in the past here have thrown things out, but then product is like, you sound tone deaf because you didn't know we were already doing this, or we already tried that and decided not to. So we wanted, yeah, so I had to do that sleuthing behind the scenes. The other thing I did too is I actually wireframed everything myself, which researchers don't always do. But because everyone was focusing on launch, we did not want to take away time from a designer. And yeah, so they were purposely very low fidelity, like just think gray boxes and, you know, like kind of the more Miro level wireframing than a design system. And that was also to communicate, these are design concepts, not design solutions. These are not thought through. These are just to communicate what this could be. So yeah, doing the sleuthing, talking to PMs about what's working, identifying what we've already tried and had a bad experience with, and then also making the wireframes themselves was all the prep. So I would say I think I worked maybe 2 weeks almost exclusively on like getting ready for that VP conversation.
Wow, honestly, props to you for doing the doing the wireframing on your own. That's amazing. And so as you started to, have those VP level conversations, kind of what were you hearing back from folks of like, we love some of these ideas. These ideas are new. I don't know about these ones.
Yeah, so there was like between 5 and 7 product VPs in the room, and also many of them are new. Like some of them got hired after I did. So like it's still a very new team and they're figuring each other out. We in research and design are figuring the product relationship out. So I think that was a layer of the dynamic. But then the other layer is some of these new people come in like expecting research to be a super close partner. Some of them don't have the experience of research doing anything except for usability testing. So we had this like range, and the most immediate reaction, I mean, people were reacting to the concepts in real time, mainly around like, so we at SiriusXM, most of our user base are more like Gen X and older, and we need to grow into the younger generation. So there was a lot of discussion at the concepts that were pointed at those, how can we pull in and satisfy the younger generation? So those concepts there was more discussion about, but the other thing that was really apparent is that people started like messaging my boss, like, we need Laura to run workshops for us. Like they saw what was possible, but they wanted to do one where they were involved in the planning. They had control over who participated, right? So they wanted to run a similar workshop that was more focused on the outputs they wanted.
Nice. Yeah, I think that's awesome that you were able to like really kind of inspire a totally different, way of thinking or activity change of how these workshops could be valuable for other teams in the future as well. I think one thing in terms of thinking about like what you maybe wouldn't do again, it seemed a little notable not to include, product in the workshop itself. And I'm curious, like, is that something that was like, what was the reason why? And like, why would you maybe do it differently in the future?
Yeah, I originally did push a little bit on that. I wanted product to be a part of it. But so the two reasons are, this is the first time we're doing it. Let's just make sure it goes well. and to know what to do after the workshop. Because again, also like the design and research leadership team, they're also new, so they're figuring each other out. But then yeah, the other reason was we didn't want to take time away from people, but also looking back, the workshop was 4 hours total. It was a lot of work for me, but for the participants, it was 4 hours. So I don't think it would have been detrimental to, ask some product managers to participate for 4 hours in a workshop. But yeah, in the future, we would definitely have product managers, maybe some tech leads, and then at SiriusXM, there is a group called programming, and they should definitely be in it as well. So outside of product too.
Nice. And then, before we transition over to the Q&A, is there any other final learnings that you think you'd want to talk through for the group?
Yes. Yeah. So, and I know we have this slide up here, so I'm just going to look at it real quick, see what we didn't cover. Okay. User research. So the only thing that user research did in this process was, I used this old foundational research that was for like the marketing organization. So also in these, when I was doing the readout with the product VPs and the like on the ground level PMs, everyone asked, oh, okay, so what did customers think about it? And, back when I was at my previous company, I did concept validation research all the time, and I enabled other people to run concept validation research. And so I wanted it to be part of this process, but we didn't have time. Also, like our recruiting, is still getting, our recruiting process is getting improved, so we can be more targeted about who we speak with. But what I would definitely do next time is if we're doing in this workshop, you need to bake in time to do concept validation research. So do all the stuff, get the ideas out, narrow it down to some sort of list, and then do the validation research so that when you are sharing it with product partners or whoever, you actually know what ideas customers want versus not want, because otherwise it's just a little too abstract and things can spin, and whatever they care about in the moment, they're going to latch onto. But both here and several other places I've worked, when people get that evidence from user research, they listen to it. So I do feel, skipping that part also led to less traction in the uptake. Yeah, and I guess yeah, the other thing about timing did not work super well, but it's like, and you and I talked about this when we were prepping, there is no perfect time. Don't wait until everyone has bandwidth or the timing is right. Just, do the thing and trial and error as you go, pivot if you need to. So I think that's mainly what didn't work well. And I think there's another slide on what did work well. We could go over that as well.
Yes.
Cool. Oh, a big thing is, this was a culture building exercise. So the participating designers and researchers, again, they had been so incredibly heads down on the nuances of this product that they really enjoyed the opportunity to carve out time and space to like take a breath, think forward, be creative. So they really enjoyed that. And, I'm sure a cross-functional group would feel similar. And also, you keep hearing me say everyone's new. Not everyone, but so many people are new at SiriusXM. If it's cross-functional too, like building relationships between the designers and the PMs and the other partners that are working together that are just having these transactional remote Zoom-based conversations, having this other space to like build connection. Oh, and actually there is at least one VP that fiercely believes in some of these concepts, and she has some new hires and basically is like, I'm making sure we are baking research into our process. So I think that is something that worked well. And that's just something in general I recommend with research is you can't force people to listen, but you can find the people that listen. And then when they succeed, other people are going to learn from them. And then people will start coming. So it's like, relationship building, you can lead a horse to water, just work with the people that are excited for your research.
Absolutely. I think with that, we can move over to the question side. I've seen a couple questions come in already, trying to kind of sift through the chat. But folks, if anyone wants to drop more questions into the Q&A box on the bottom of the screen, then I can, or I think I can, unmute you and call on you to answer your, so you can ask your question live if you'd like to. I'm gonna start, actually first with the question that came through the chat to give people a chance to post. Laura, what has your experience been with how research can impact like leadership decisions and even something like product roadmaps?
Yeah, I'll speak to the research I'm working on right now because I feel it's been a really successful partnership, and it's a little different than the company I was just in. So for context, where I was before, it was called a startup called Drift. At Drift, research was centralized and we weren't embedded on teams. And so there was always that kind of disconnect. We would deliver insights and do our best to keep advocating for things. But we just, we weren't in the stand-ups, we weren't in the Slack channels, we weren't in the conversations to keep reminding people of the stuff that we haven't, embedded in our mind. Whereas at SiriusXM, I'm also a shared resource, but after launch, there were two main things that we knew we needed to improve in January. And so I'm working on one, Kelsey's working on the other, and I'm in the stand-ups, I'm in the Slack channels, and, as I've been actively doing a mix of discovery and usability research, people say we're trying to make this tiny design decision now, and I can go through my FigJam board and pull out what I need to in the moment. But then also they're talking about what should the longer term roadmap look like for this part of the experience. And they asked me, Laura, what do users say? So I think having this closer relationship where you're in daily stand-ups, you're in Slacks, really helps build the relationships, but then also people start to see the value. Like otherwise they're just making a bunch of decisions based on internal assumptions. Now that's still only the shorter term roadmap, maybe like still within Q1, maybe Q2. But I want to keep working on process where we get to a place where, you know, researchers as a function, we are helping say what's in H2 of 2024. Like we want to be thinking 6+ months out, not, you know, 6 weeks out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, I'm gonna now try and unmute one of our attendees, Anna Hughes. I saw you had some great questions that came through, so I will unmute you if you want to ask your question directly. You should be unmuted now if you want to go ahead, Anna.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so I think this also may have come up in some of the regular chat, but and you sort of touched on this, but how did you think about reconciling business objectives against user needs in this process?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think because there was just a lack of user research, I didn't run into that conflict very much. The conflict was more, we know more about what the business wants than like what our users actually need.
Yeah, right. Got it. And then the other one was, I've been in these before where all the ideas start to converge and you kind of wind up with everybody kind of saying the same thing. Or how do you prevent that from happening? And what do you do if you start to see one of these workshops sort of drifting that way?
Yes, and that is one of the reasons I love Creative Matrix as a method, because each row you have silent ideation. So I would say we're going to spend 10 minutes. So you're going to ideate on this one business prompt for all the segments and jobs to be done. Spend 10 minutes and then pick one idea, and then we'll go around the room and share what's your number one favorite idea out of that. So that helps prevent the groupthink.
Yeah.
And I did ask people to write down their sticky notes. Like I said, just so you know, me and Kelsey are going to be reading these after the workshop. So make sure you are very descriptive in how you're describing these ideas in your sticky notes. And I only had to do follow-up Slack questions for maybe 3 or 4 sticky notes. So yeah, want that broad view, no groupthink.
Yeah. Thank you. That's what I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna. I'm gonna mute you again and hand the baton to, I think, Nikki Murray. I saw a few things in here from. So Nikki, you should be able to unmute if you want to ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, yeah. So I was asking, and I'm sorry if I missed this in the introduction, but did you, Laura, did you have to get executive sponsorship or, you know, any kind of executive buy-in to kind of push this entire project through? And I was also curious about what your ratio to researcher, design, and kind of like product group is.
Yeah, also great questions. And that reminds me of one really critical part of the timeline that I forgot to mention. So I did not need executive buy-in in the to do this. However, when I was doing the share out with the VP, the product VPs, our SVP of product was sitting in the conference room in Manhattan. And at the end, the CEO, Jennifer Witz, just walked in and she said, "What are you talking about?" And so Sasha said, "Oh, Laura's sharing some future concepts for what we can do after the launch." And so now in the executive leadership team meetings, she has been asking, where are those ideas? So the pressure is coming from the CEO for these particular concepts. And I think, you know, obviously the SVPs of product are in control of like what the roadmap is and what innovation looks like. But just the happenstance that she was in that conversation is really helping to hold product accountable to think beyond what do we need to fix right now from the launch, because we have some very vocal users that we are, you know, very much hustling to make some improvements for. The ratio question though, there's 2 researchers on SiriusXM, the app, for, I don't know, between 10 and 20 designers. So the ratio is not great. And we're in this space where, you know, Kelsey and I divide and conquer what's the most important for the business right now. That's what we work on. And we unfortunately cannot support everything.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, you mentioned that, you were going to stand-ups and everything else, and I just wondered how how much time that would consume if you didn't have a larger group, but thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. So this like library research I'm working on right now, it is one of the two most important things that all of product is working on. So that's why I'm in the daily stand-ups, and that's, what's making it effective. But once the urgency of library is done, then I probably won't be around for that team as much, so I think, but when it's a more normal level of urgency project, I have to think through how do I keep close, but still have time to work.
Awesome. Thank you, Nikki. I know we're a little bit past time. I think we can squeeze one more question in, and then anything else, we do have Laura in the People Nerds Slack community. I know Kathleen dropped a link in the chat, and I'll also drop it in there again if you want to join and just have some questions going on in Slack. But I think our final question will be from Kelly. I will give you unmutabilities, Kelly, if you want to ask your questions.
Great, thanks. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm just curious how you dealt with the logistics of the collection of the ideas. Was it digital or was it physical? Because I find when I try to collect them right on the digital platform, there's often tech difficulties or people aren't familiar with the platform, and that can cause issues with timing and just confusion in general.
Yeah, so luckily, just our attendees were all very familiar in FigJam, so I didn't run into that issue. But back at previous organizations like Allstate or Comcast, especially if it's cross-functional, people outside of design, they're not as familiar. So the way I've attacked that is in the beginning, I will do a walkthrough of like, here's Miro or Mural or FigJam, here's how it works. Here, let's all practice zooming in, zooming out, making a sticky note, writing on it, moving it around. It's worth that extra 5 minutes in the beginning just to make sure crazy stuff doesn't happen on the board.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was digital.
And then were you also, were you and other people on the team collecting ideas with Post-its and things like that as they were shared?
So because we had the silent sticky note ideation before sharing it verbally, that also kind of, because I've definitely been in workshops where people just talk and I see they're not making sticky notes. So yeah, I did intentionally we're gonna write the ideas down first before you say anything verbally.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I know we have so many more questions, but we are out of time. We will feel free to drop those questions over in People Nerds. I will also be sharing out the different links and amazing resources that Laura had referenced in that chat as well. And folks will get the recording of this slide to their inbox in about 24 hours. So feel free to watch it again and always reach out if you have any questions. But thank you so much for joining us, everyone, as well as, Laura, for taking the time and sharing your insights to walk us through this whole project.
Thanks, everyone. And yeah, don't forget, just keep trying different ways. You just got to push innovation in any way that works for your organization.
100%. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good one.